What if your own body turned against you, attacking your kidneys? That's got to be scary, right? But it's the reality for people with lupus nephritis, and it's serious. Until recently, treatment options have been so limited.
Yeah, it's a tough diagnosis for sure.
But there's some new research. It's offering a glimmer of hope. There's a trial that was published just this month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's making waves. They tested a new drug called Obinutuzumab. And the results, well, they're pretty exciting. But before we get into all of those specifics, let's take a step back. Imagine a time when lupus nephritis was a complete mystery.
Like way back.
Way back.
Okay, so we're talking early 20th century. Doctors were baffled. They had such a limited understanding of these autoimmune diseases. And treatments. Totally ineffective.
It's hard to imagine facing a disease that felt like such an enigma.
I mean, patients suffered. They faced declining kidney function with few answers.
Yeah, but over time, researchers started piecing together that puzzle.
Right. In the 1930s and 40s, the understanding of lupus started evolving. Researchers realized it wasn't just a skin condition. It was a systemic disease. It could impact multiple organs. But even with that breakthrough, treatment remained elusive.
So progress, but patients were still suffering. Then in the 1950s came the introduction of corticosteroids.
Corticosteroids, powerful anti-inflammatory drugs, a turning point. They offered some relief, but of course, there was a catch. Significant side effects.
A tough trade-off. And then researchers, they continued searching for better options. In the 60s and 70s, they began exploring cytotoxic agents like cyclophosphamide.
Yeah, cyclophosphamide originally was used in chemotherapy.
Wow.
These drugs suppress the immune system, but again, toxicity, major concern. This whole balancing act between efficacy and safety, it continued to be a theme in lupus nephritis research.
It's a frustrating pattern.
Oh.
But amidst all those challenges, there was a crucial breakthrough on the horizon. During the 1980s and 90s, researchers pinpointed B cells
as key players
in lupus pathogenesis.
It was pivotal, B cells. They're responsible for producing antibodies, but in lupus, they start producing these antibodies that attack the body's own tissues.
So they're like the bad guys.
Yeah. This discovery provided a clear target for potential new therapies.
It's like finally identifying the culprit. This breakthrough led to the development of rituximab.
A drug designed to deplete B cells.
Right. Early studies offered promise, but then a large-scale trial in the early 2000s, known as the LUNAR trial.
Dashed those hopes.
It did. Rituximab. When added to standard therapy, it failed to show any significant improvement. A major setback.
Heartbreaking when a promising treatment falls short.
But researchers, they dug deeper instead of giving up. They started questioning, whether all B-cell depletion was created equal. They began exploring different types of anti-CD20 antibodies, including one called Obinutuzumab.
Interesting. How is Obinutuzumab different?
Well, Obinutuzumab stands out because it actually induces more potent and direct B-cell death compared to rituximab. Yeah. Phase 2 trials in late 2010s offered that glimmer of hope. They showed improvement in renal responses.
That's where the REGENCY trial comes in.
Exactly. After decades of searching, could this be the breakthrough, the one that researchers have been hoping for?
The REGENCY trial, it aimed to answer that question.
It did. A large-scale study definitely determined if Obinutuzumab could deliver on the promise of B-cell targeted therapy for lupus nephritis.
Okay, so what did they find? Did Obinutuzumab live up to the hype?
So the trial's primary goal was to see if Obinutuzumab, when added to the standard therapy, could lead to a complete renal response at week 76.
Complete renal response. What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? In simpler terms, it means significant improvement in kidney function.
And the results?
They did. A complete renal response at week 76 was observed in 46.4% of the patients in the Obinutuzumab group.
Wow, that's impressive. What about the placebo group?
The placebo group, only 33.1%.
Whoa. That's a difference of over 13 percentage points. Pretty promising. But what does a complete renal response actually look like? What does that mean for someone who's living with lupus nephritis?
Yeah, for those of us who aren't nephrologists.
Right. Well, a complete renal response in this trial, it meant meeting 3 very specific criteria. First, the protein to creatinine ratio in their urine. It had to be less than 0.5.
Okay, and that ratio?
That ratio measures how much protein is leaking from the kidneys into the urine. So essentially, the lower the ratio, the better those kidneys are functioning.
So it's like a report card for the kidneys. Lower number, they're doing their job.
Exactly. Exactly, filtering those waste products.
Okay, so what were the other two criteria for a complete renal response?
Okay, the second criteria was their eGFR. That's the estimated glomerular filtration rate. Basically, it's a measure of how well the kidneys are filtering blood. For a complete renal response, their eGFR had to be at least 85% of their baseline value.
So higher eGFR, better kidney function.
Mm.
And the third criteria?
The final criteria was that they couldn't have had any intercurrent events.
Like what?
So no rescue therapy, treatment failure, death, or early withdrawal from the trial. So essentially their improvement had to be consistent and sustained.
So to achieve a complete renal response, patients had to hit all three of these targets.
And a significantly higher percentage of those taking Obinutuzumab did.
They did, but we know there were also secondary endpoints in the trial.
Did Obinutuzumab show any benefits there?
Yes, it did. One of the most notable findings. A higher percentage of patients in the Obinutuzumab group achieved complete renal response while taking a lower dose of prednisone.
That's huge. Remember we talked about those nasty side effects of corticosteroids?
Yeah, if Obinutuzumab can help patients achieve the same level of kidney improvement with fewer steroids, major win. Were there any other noteworthy secondary endpoints?
Another key finding was the improvement in proteinuria. Remember, protein in the urine, it's a sign that the kidneys aren't filtering properly. A larger percentage of that Obinutuzumab group saw a significant reduction in their protein to creatinine ratio by week 76.
So overall, it sounds like the efficacy data for Obinutuzumab in this trial is pretty impressive.
It is.
But we know no medication comes without potential risks. So what did the REGENCY trial reveal about the safety profile of Obinutuzumab? Were there any concerns?
Yeah, unfortunately there were. While the efficacy data, it's very encouraging, the trial did reveal some important safety considerations.
Okay, I was afraid you might say that. What were the main concerns that emerged from the trial?
The most significant finding was that serious adverse events were more frequent in the Obinutuzumab group.
Okay.
In fact, 32.4% of the patients in the Obinutuzumab group experienced a serious adverse event,
And in the placebo group?
compared to 18.2% of those in the placebo group.
That's a substantial difference. What kinds of adverse events were most commonly reported?
A significant number of those adverse events were infections. Serious infections occurred more often in the Obinutuzumab group, incidence of 16.9%.
Compared to?
Compared to 7.6% in the placebo group, that's more than double the rate.
That is concerning. What types of infections were most common? Were there any specific patterns that emerged?
They reported a variety of infections, but one that stood out, especially early in the trial, was COVID-19 pneumonia.
Makes sense. The trial took place during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right. And we know that immunosuppressed patients are more vulnerable to severe COVID-19.
Did the researchers comment on this COVID-19 signal at all? Did they offer any insights into how the pandemic might have impacted the results?
They did. They acknowledged that the pandemic likely influenced the trial, particularly the infection rates. They noted that there were, thankfully, no COVID-19 related serious adverse events during the latter half of the trial, which coincided with the availability of vaccines and antiviral therapies.
So maybe a bit of good news there. As COVID-19 became more manageable, those serious adverse events related to the virus decreased. But setting COVID-19 aside for a moment, were there any other safety signals that raised concerns?
There were a few other serious adverse events reported, but none that occurred in a large number of patients. There were 3 deaths in the Obinutuzumab group, 2 from COVID-19 pneumonia and 1 from nephrotic syndrome.
Oh, okay.
And there was 1 death in the placebo group, and that one was attributed to COVID-19.
So mixed bag, right, when it comes to safety. On the one hand, we have this incredible, promising efficacy data showing significant improvements in kidney function for a lot of patients taking Obinutuzumab.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we have this increased risk of serious adverse events, particularly infections. It's a complex equation.
It is, and that's why it's crucial to have that balanced perspective, right? The potential benefits of Obinutuzumab need to be carefully weighed against the potential risks, especially that increased risk of infection. It's a classic risk-benefit analysis.
And that's where expert opinions become so valuable. We need to hear from the specialists, the ones grappling with these complex issues in their daily practice.
Absolutely. Different medical specialists, including nephrologists, rheumatologists, immunologists, they've all weighed in on the REGENCY trial results. Each specialty, they bring a unique perspective to the table. They help us understand what these findings mean for patients.
Okay, so I'm ready to hear what the experts have to say. Let's start with the nephrologists.
Sounds good.
After all, They're the kidney specialists, right? So their insights are particularly relevant here. What's the nephrology community's take on the REGENCY trial and the potential of obinutuzumab?
Nephrologists, they see the REGENCY trial as a significant advance. They're excited about the potential for obinutuzumab to truly make a difference in the lives of patients with active lupus nephritis.
Yeah.
The data showing those improvements in complete renal response, extremely encouraging.
So from the nephrology perspective, the efficacy data is pretty compelling. They're optimistic about the potential of this drug to help preserve kidney function in the long term.
They are. They're also encouraged by the finding that obinutuzumab can help achieve complete renal response with those lower prednisone doses. Huge because, as we've discussed, long-term steroid use. All sorts of unwanted side effects.
It's like finding a way to maximize the benefits while minimizing the downsides. That's what we're all hoping for. But I imagine nephrologists are also acutely aware of the safety concerns, particularly that increased risk of infection.
Absolutely. They're not losing sight of those risks. Nephrologists, they emphasize the importance of carefully selecting which patients receive obinutuzumab and then diligently monitoring them for potential adverse events. It's all about finding that balance between maximizing benefit and minimizing risk.
Sounds like a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
What about rheumatologists? How are they viewing the REGENCY trial and the potential of obinutuzumab? They're the specialists who manage autoimmune diseases like lupus, right? So their perspective is essential as well.
Rheumatologists are equally enthusiastic about the potential of obinutuzumab. They see it as a valuable new tool in the fight against lupus nephritis. It's a complex disease, often requires that multi-pronged treatment approach.
Where does obinutuzumab fit into the existing treatment landscape for lupus nephritis? Are there other medications that are commonly used? How would obinutuzumab be integrated into current treatment regimens?
So there are existing treatments, including belimumab, another biologic targeting B cells, but obinutuzumab's unique mechanism of action, specifically its ability to induce a deeper depletion of B cells, could offer advantages for certain patients.
So it's not necessarily a replacement for existing therapies, but rather a potential new option for specific patient populations.
Exactly. Adds to the arsenal.
It does. It could be particularly beneficial for patients who haven't responded well to other therapies or who face a higher risk of kidney failure. It's all about tailoring treatment to the individual's needs. I'm guessing rheumatologists, like nephrologists, are taking a cautious approach given the safety concerns that emerged from the REGENCY trial.
They are. Rheumatologists strongly advocate for a thorough risk-benefit assessment for each patient. They want to ensure that the potential benefits of obinutuzumab, they outweigh the potential risks for each individual.
So it's not just about the drug itself, but also how it's used, right? How it's integrated into a patient's overall treatment plan and how those decisions are made collaboratively between the doctor and the patient.
Exactly. It's a partnership, shared decision-making process based on open communication and a thorough understanding of the risks and benefits.
Great to see this emphasis on patient-centered care. The REGENCY trial has clearly sparked a lot of discussion in the medical community. It seems like everyone's talking about it.
It has, and it's not just the nephrologists and rheumatologists who are weighing in.
Right.
Immunologists, the experts on the immune system, they also have valuable insights to offer.
Okay, let's bring them into the conversation. What's the immunology perspective on the REGENCY trial and obinutuzumab? How do they interpret these findings within, the broader context of immune system function?
Immunologists, they see the REGENCY trial as a strong validation of the B-cell depletion strategy in treating lupus nephritis. They've long believed that B cells play a central role in driving the disease and the success of obinutuzumab. It further reinforces that understanding.
It's like confirming a long-held suspicion. It must be gratifying for immunologists to see their theories about the role of B cells play out in a large-scale clinical trial with such positive results. But I imagine they also have concerns about the potential downsides of B-cell depletion.
Of course. While they're excited about the potential benefits, immunologists are also acutely aware that manipulating the immune system, unintended consequences.
So what are some of the long-term implications of B-cell depletion that immunologists are thinking about? What are the potential downsides that need to be carefully considered?
One concern is the potential for immune reconstitution defects. This means that after B-cell depletion, the immune system might not fully recover or function as effectively as it did before treatment.
So, in essence, we're trying to dampen the immune response to prevent it from attacking the kidneys, But in doing so, we might be weakening the immune system's ability to fight off other infections.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a risk that needs to be carefully considered and studied further. Immunologists are actively researching these long-term effects to better understand those potential consequences and how to mitigate them.
So even with this potential breakthrough, there's still so much we don't know about the complexities of the immune system and those long-term effects of manipulating it. It's humbling. A reminder that scientific progress is often 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Absolutely. It's a constant process of discovery,
Mhm.
learning, refining our understanding.
And amidst all of these scientific and medical perspectives, we can't forget the most important voice of all, the patient's voice. What are patient advocates saying about the REGENCY trial and the potential of obinutuzumab? How are these findings being received by the people who are actually living with lupus nephritis?
From a patient advocacy perspective, the REGENCY trial, it's a beacon of hope. For patients and their families, it represents a significant step forward in the fight against a disease that can be incredibly challenging to manage.
I can only imagine that sense of relief and excitement that these positive results must bring to those who've been battling lupus nephritis for years, often with limited treatment options.
It's a powerful reminder that research can make a real difference in people's lives.
But I'm guessing patient advocates are also pushing for clear and transparent communication about the risks associated with obinutuzumab,
Absolutely.
particularly that increased risk of infection.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that patients have all the information they need to make informed decisions about their treatment in collaboration with their healthcare providers.
Absolutely. They're advocating for shared decision-making, where patients are empowered to weigh those potential benefits and risks and to make choices that align with their individual values and preferences.
Crucial aspect of ethical and patient-centered care. The REGENCY trial has clearly generated a lot of excitement. But it's not a magic bullet, is it?
It's not. It's important to remember that every patient is unique.
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for another. This is where personalized medicine comes in, tailoring treatment approaches to the individual's needs and circumstances.
So the REGENCY trial has opened up new possibilities, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Precisely. And patient advocates, they're also calling for more research into long-term outcomes and patient-reported outcomes, such as pain, fatigue, and overall well-being. These are aspects of the disease that can significantly impact a patient's quality of life.
It's a shift from just focusing on clinical markers to truly understanding the patient's experience of living with the disease. But what about the regulatory perspective? Where does obinutuzumab stand in terms of potential approval for lupus nephritis? What are the experts saying about its chances?
The REGENCY trial provides strong evidence to support potential approval for obinutuzumab in this indication.
So the data is compelling enough to warrant serious consideration by regulatory agencies.
It is. The trial was well designed, the results were statistically significant, and the endpoints were clinically meaningful.
But I imagine regulatory agencies will also want to scrutinize the safety data, right? Especially that increased risk of infection. They'll want to make sure that the potential benefits outweigh the potential risks.
Absolutely. That's a crucial part of their evaluation process. They'll be looking at the risk-benefit profile as well as potential strategies to mitigate those risks in clinical practice.
Though things like carefully selecting patients, implementing monitoring protocols, and potentially using prophylactic measures to prevent infections.
Exactly. They'll also be looking at the existing treatment landscape for lupus nephritis and assessing how obinutuzumab compares to other approved therapies in terms of both efficacy and safety.
So it's not just about the drug in isolation, but about how it fits into the broader context of treatment options available to patients.
Right. And they'll likely require post-marketing surveillance to monitor the long-term safety and effectiveness of obinutuzumab once it's available to patients.
So even if it's approved, the evaluation process doesn't end there.
Right.
There will be ongoing monitoring to ensure that the drug continues to demonstrate a positive benefit-risk profile in real-world settings.
It's a continuous process of assessment and evaluation.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've explored the history of lupus nephritis research, delved into the intricacies of the REGENCY trial, heard from a range of experts about the potential implications of these findings. But before we move on, I want to take a moment to kind of synthesize all of this information. For our listener, what are the key takeaways from this first part of our deep dive?
Here are a few key points to keep in mind. First, the REGENCY trial offers a glimmer of hope for patients with lupus nephritis.
Yeah.
The results suggest that obinutuzumab, when added to standard therapy, can significantly improve renal outcomes.
So a potential new tool in the fight against this challenging disease.
Exactly. Second, it's important to remember that obinutuzumab, it does come with potential risks. Most notably, an increased risk of infection. Careful risk-benefit assessment is essential.
So it's not a decision to be taken lightly.
No.
It requires open communication between the patient and their healthcare provider to ensure that it's the right choice.
Absolutely. Third, the REGENCY trial. It underscores the importance of personalized medicine in lupus nephritis. Not all patients are the same.
Right.
And what works for one person might not work for another.
So moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach toward more tailored treatment strategies.
Precisely. And finally, the REGENCY trial ignited a wave of new research and innovation in lupus nephritis. Scientists, they're exploring new drug targets, combination therapies, and ways to personalize treatment.
So a renewed sense of optimism in the field.
Absolutely. The future of lupus nephritis research and treatment is looking brighter than ever.
This has been incredibly insightful. I feel like we've only scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
You're right. In our next segment, we'll delve into the future of lupus nephritis research and treatment. We'll explore what new avenues of investigation are opening up, what key questions researchers are grappling with, and what patients can expect in the years to come.
I can't wait to continue this journey. It feels like we're on the cusp of something truly transformative.
We are. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the world of lupus nephritis. We just explored the REGENCY trial and its potential impact, but the story doesn't end there, right? What's fascinating here is the future of lupus nephritis research. Where do we go from here? What new horizons are scientists exploring?
It feels like we're at a crossroads. I
Right.
know. We have this potential breakthrough with obinutuzumab, but there's still so many unknowns. So what happens next? What are the big questions that researchers are trying to answer?
I think one of the most pressing questions is long-term efficacy. The REGENCY trial followed patients for 76 weeks, which is encouraging.
Yeah.
But lupus nephritis, it's a chronic, lifelong disease. We need to understand how obinutuzumab performs over years, not just months.
So will those impressive renal response rates hold up over time?
Yeah.
Will patients be able to stay in remission?
Absolutely. And related to that is the question of the durability of the response.
Okay.
Even if obinutuzumab leads to long-term remission, will patients need ongoing treatment to maintain it? Or could they potentially stop treatment at some point and live medication-free?
That'd be incredible. Freedom from medication, from the side effects, the costs,
Yeah.
the hassle of infusions.
Right.
It would be life-changing for so many people. But realistically, is that even a possibility with a disease like lupus nephritis?
It's too early to say for sure, but some researchers are exploring this concept of drug-free remission in lupus nephritis.
Interesting.
Obinutuzumab could potentially play a role in achieving this, but more research is definitely needed.
It's a glimmer of hope, something to strive for. What other research avenues are scientists pursuing in the fight against lupus nephritis? What's on the horizon?
Personalized medicine is a major area of focus.
Okay.
We need to move away from this one-size-fits-all approach and develop better tools to predict which patients will respond best to which treatments. Each person with lupus nephritis is unique, and their treatment should reflect that.
Makes sense. But how do we personalize treatment for a disease as complex as lupus nephritis? What are the tools that researchers are using to achieve this?
Biomarkers are a hot topic.
Okay.
These are measurable indicators that can provide clues about disease activity severity or even predict how someone might respond to a particular therapy.
So imagine a blood test that could tell you with a high degree of certainty whether obinutuzumab is likely to work for you before you even start treatment. That would be revolutionary.
Exactly. And researchers are investigating various types of biomarkers, genetic markers, immune system markers, even markers of kidney damage. By analyzing these markers, we can start to build a more detailed picture of each patient's disease and tailor their treatment accordingly.
It's like creating a personalized roadmap for each patient's journey with lupus nephritis. What other innovative approaches are being explored in the research world?
Beyond biomarkers, scientists are also investigating new drug targets and combination therapies. They're exploring different pathways involved in the disease process, looking for ways to interrupt those pathways and prevent damage.
So rather than just suppressing the immune system as a whole, they're trying to target specific components of the immune response that are driving the disease.
Precisely. For example, some researchers are looking at targeting specific cytokines, which are signaling molecules involved in inflammation. Others are investigating ways to modulate the immune system without completely depleting B cells, aiming for a more nuanced and balanced approach.
It's fascinating how research constantly evolves, building upon previous discoveries and searching for more targeted and effective therapies. You mentioned combination therapies as well. What's the rationale behind that approach?
Combination therapies involve using two or more drugs together, each targeting different aspects of the disease. The idea is to achieve a synergistic effect, hitting the disease from multiple angles and potentially enhancing the effectiveness of treatment.
So it's like a multi-pronged attack on lupus nephritis, using different weapons to weaken the enemy. What kinds of combinations are being explored?
One approach is combining obinutuzumab with other biologics or with targeted synthetic DARDs, which are a newer class of immunosuppressants. Researchers are looking for combinations that can maximize efficacy while minimizing side effects.
So building on the foundation laid by the REGENCY trial and trying to fine-tune treatment strategies to achieve the best possible outcomes for patients.
Exactly. And another important shift in research is the increasing focus on patient-reported outcomes.
This is something we touched on earlier, but I'd love to hear more about it. What are patient-reported outcomes, and why are they becoming so important in lupus nephritis research?
Patient-reported outcomes are measures of how patients feel and function in their daily lives. They capture the patient's perspective on the impact of the disease and its treatment. Rather than just relying on lab tests and clinical observations, researchers are now asking patients directly about their symptoms, their quality of life, their overall experience of living with lupus nephritis.
So recognizing that a patient's perspective is just as valuable as the data collected in a clinical trial.
Exactly. These patient-centered outcomes are becoming increasingly important in drug development and clinical care.
It's a recognition that treating the disease is only part of the equation. We also need to focus on improving the well-being of the people living with the disease.
Precisely. By incorporating patient-reported outcomes into research, we can gain a more holistic understanding of the impact of lupus nephritis and develop therapies that not only address the physical aspects of the disease, but also improve the overall quality of life for patients.
It's a powerful shift in perspective. From a broader standpoint, what do you see as the biggest challenges that still need to be overcome in lupus nephritis research? What are the roadblocks that scientists are grappling with as they strive to develop better treatments and ultimately find a cure?
I think one of the biggest challenges is the heterogeneity of the disease. Lupus nephritis can manifest in different ways, and patients can experience a wide range of symptoms and disease courses. This makes it difficult to study and treat because there's no one-size-fits-all approach.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Right.
The disease presents itself differently in each individual, making it harder to pinpoint the underlying mechanisms and develop targeted therapies.
Exactly. Another challenge is the complexity of the immune system itself. We're still unraveling the intricate interplay of different immune cells and signaling pathways. It's a complex web of interactions, and disrupting one part of the web can have unintended consequences elsewhere.
It's a constant process of discovery and refinement.
Mm.
We learn something new, and it opens up a whole new set of questions.
Mhm.
It must be incredibly challenging for researchers to navigate this intricate landscape.
It is. And on top of these scientific challenges, there's also the issue of funding mind. Lupus nephritis is a relatively rare disease, and research funding can be limited. More resources and investment are needed to support the brilliant minds working to unlock the mysteries of this disease.
It's a reminder that advocacy and awareness are crucial. We need to keep shining a light on lupus nephritis and pushing for more research funding to support the development of better treatments and ultimately a cure. Speaking of innovation, I'm curious about the role of technology in shaping the future of lupus nephritis research. Are there any technological advancements that you're particularly excited about?
There are several. One area that's rapidly evolving is artificial intelligence, or AI algorithms, can analyze vast amounts of data, identify patterns, and potentially predict disease outcomes.
So imagine an AI system that could analyze a patient's medical history, genetic information, and lab results to create a personalized risk profile for lupus nephritis or predict their response to a specific treatment.
Exactly. And AI can also be used to accelerate the drug discovery process. AI algorithms can screen enormous libraries of chemical compounds to identify potential drug candidates, potentially speeding up the development of new therapies.
So using the power of technology to streamline research and make it more efficient, are there other areas where technology is making a difference?
Telemedicine is another area showing great promise. This involves using technology to provide healthcare remotely through virtual appointments and remote monitoring.
So breaking down geographical barriers and making healthcare more accessible for those who might have difficulty traveling to see their doctor?
Exactly. Telemedicine can be particularly beneficial for patients with lupus nephritis who often require frequent monitoring and adjustments to their treatment regimens.
And what about wearable technology? I can see how smartwatches and fitness trackers could be useful for monitoring physical activity and sleep patterns, but how do they apply to lupus nephritis?
Researchers are exploring ways to use wearable devices to collect real-time data on patient symptoms such as fatigue and pain levels. This continuous monitoring can provide valuable insights into disease fluctuations and treatment responses, allowing for timely interventions.
It's incredible to think about how technology is transforming healthcare and offering new possibilities for managing chronic diseases like lupus nephritis.
It's a paradigm shift. And these technological advancements, coupled with the ongoing research efforts, are giving us reason to be optimistic about the future for people living with lupus nephritis. It's an exciting time to be in this field, and I'm eager to see what the next chapter holds.
It's inspiring to hear your optimism and to witness the incredible progress being made. But we need to acknowledge that while research and technology offer hope, there's still a human element to this story that can't be ignored.
You're absolutely right. Behind the data, the statistics, the scientific advancements, there are real people living with lupus nephritis every day. Their stories, their experiences, their challenges, and their triumphs are what truly matter.
And that's what we'll explore in our final segment. We'll hear from patients directly allowing their voices to be heard and their stories to be shared. It's a reminder that while research is essential, it's ultimately about improving the lives of those affected by this disease.
I'm looking forward to that. Their perspectives are invaluable.
Welcome back to our deep dive into lupus nephritis. We spent the last two segments exploring the science, the research, the expert perspectives, but now it's time to shift our focus and listen to the voices of those who know this disease best, the patients themselves. Now, it's one thing to understand lupus nephritis in theory, but it's another to really grasp the day-to-day realities of living with this complex condition.
Yeah, it's so true. The patient's perspective is essential. It reminds us that behind all the statistics and research findings and medical jargon, there are real people navigating the challenges of lupus nephritis.
Absolutely. And each person's story is unique, of course.
Right.
But there are also common threads that weave through these diverse experiences.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that people living with lupus nephritis often talk about? What are the challenges they face? The insights they've gained, the lessons they've learned along the way?
One of the most prevalent themes is the unpredictable nature of the disease. Lupus nephritis, it's notorious for its flares, those sudden periods when symptoms worsen. Those flares can be incredibly disruptive, impacting work, school, social activities, overall quality of life.
Yeah.
Imagine having to put your life on hold, not knowing when you'll feel well enough to resume your normal routine.
It must create a constant sense of uncertainty, like a feeling of being on edge, never knowing when the next flare might strike.
Exactly.
That unpredictability must take a toll on mental health as well.
It does. Many people with lupus nephritis struggle with anxiety and depression. The constant worry about flares, the side effects of medications, the changes in appearance, all these factors can contribute to feelings of stress, sadness, and isolation.
So it's not just a physical battle, it's an emotional one as well.
It is. And then there's the challenge of living with an invisible illness.
Oh, yeah. Lupus nephritis doesn't always have outwardly visible symptoms, so that can lead to a lot of misunderstandings
Exactly.
from friends, family, even healthcare providers who may not fully grasp the severity of the disease.
Right.
It's like carrying this invisible weight, a burden that others can't see or understand.
It can be very isolating. People with lupus nephritis often find themselves having to constantly explain their condition to justify their need for accommodations, for rest, for support. It's exhausting, and it can definitely strain relationships.
But amidst those difficulties, do you also hear stories of resilience, of finding ways to cope, to adapt, to even thrive in the face of this chronic illness?
I do. I really do. Resilience is a common thread woven through these narratives. People with lupus nephritis are incredibly strong and resourceful. They find creative ways to manage their symptoms, to adapt their lifestyles, to find joy and purpose, even within the limitations imposed by the disease. They learn to listen to their bodies, to pace themselves, to advocate for their needs.
So it's about finding a new normal, a way to live a meaningful life, even with lupus nephritis.
Yes.
And I imagine connecting with others who understand this journey is incredibly important.
Oh, it is. So many people find solace and strength in connecting with others who are going through similar experiences. Support groups, online communities, those spaces provide a sense of belonging, a platform to share stories, to exchange advice, just to know that you're not alone in this journey.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of isolation, there's always the potential for connection, for finding solace and solidarity in shared experiences. And ultimately, those stories of resilience, of adaptation, of finding meaning in connection, they offer a glimmer of hope, not just for those living with lupus nephritis, but for all of us, right, facing challenges in our lives.
Absolutely. They inspire us to keep fighting, to keep searching for solutions, to never give up hope.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into lupus nephritis. We've explored the history, the science, the breakthroughs, the challenges, and most importantly, the human stories that lie at the heart of this complex disease.
It's been quite a journey of discovery.
It has. And while we've covered a lot of ground, you know, the conversation doesn't have to end here. There are so many resources available for those who want to learn more about lupus nephritis, to connect with others, or to get involved in supporting research and advocacy efforts. Remember, knowledge is power, connection is strength, and hope is absolutely essential. The future of lupus nephritis research and treatment is constantly evolving, and we have every reason to believe that better options are on the horizon.
We do.
So to our listener, we encourage you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful. And if there's one thing we hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this. Even in the face of a chronic illness, life can still be filled with meaning, purpose, and connection.